You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Straight to Video podcast. I had a lot of fun catching up with an old friend of mine on today's show as I spent some time talking to Mr. Roy Bright. Roy and I became friends for what is now over 20 years ago, which we figure out in our chat. So, anyone remember compilation CDs? You couldn't escape them some years ago. So, Roy and I both appeared on one called Bad Penny, which featured bands from all over the country. And our bands at the time, Dip and Depon Eye, would go on to do numerous gigs together, and we've stayed in touch ever since. That really is one of the cool things about the underground band scene, not just in the UK, but I think it's worldwide too. You make friends for life. You do a lot of shit and put trust in total strangers to come through for you, and pretty much for the most part, if you're not a dick, then it nearly always works out. So Roy's band Depon Eye would eventually disband, and he would form the group Exit State, which would take things to the next level with a #1 requested video on Kerrang TV, and tours with the likes of Michael Schenker, Blaze Bayley, and many, many more. For the past 8 or 9 years though, Roy has taken a total change in his creative pursuits and become a best-selling author. His first book, Judas, has already spawned several follow-ups in the likes of The Relic and Revelation, and this November a new story arrives in the form of He Came A Smilin, which, along with all the previous stories, can be ordered from Amazon or by visiting Roy's website at www.roytbright.com. This new adventure, which Roy has been on for almost 10 years now, was a total yet wonderful surprise for me to hear about, and I was excited to find out more in our chat, along with a whole host of other great stories such as his time in the Navy and his early band days. Roy certainly liked to change things up during his years, and it really was great to catch up with this guy. So, here we go on the Straight to Video podcast with my chat with the wonderful Mr. Roy Bright.
I feel the rage welling up inside, I cannot hide it. It's like a wave and it's frightening how it washes over. The things I say are from prison, I'm so out of order. The hate subsides and I'm wondering how it came to this. I search my mind but it offers up no explanation. What in my life has created all this pent up anger? One thing for sure that I really need to find the answer. I won't ever back down or have the strength to walk away. I can't hold back, speak my mind to know if I can change just the way I am.
How are you, brother?
I'm alright, I'm loving that t-shirt, mate. That's getting some wear, isn't it?
Told you, wear it with pride. It's one of my night shirts. How the devil are you, Rob?
I'm good, mate.
Do you know, I was driving home from work and I was thinking to myself, do you know what? It's probably 22, 23 years we've known each other when we did the Bad Penny album through Russ.
I was trying to think what year it was. When would it be? 2000 and...
It must be 2008.
Way before that. I was thinking...
1998. Sorry, so 1998.
Really?
I was with Reese and Tyler's mum. I was still in the house over, and it was obviously it was Justin and Matt and everybody. So that was definitely pre-2000, because I think around about the 2001 mark is when Depon Eye evolved into Alex and Pete and what have you. So
shit, man. It's just crazy, mate. Yeah, like over 20 years ago. Oh my God.
I know. And you still look exactly the same age. So I don't know what.
I think we're both doing all right. I really appreciate you sparing some time to have a chat and dive into some podcast questions. I'm interested to learn a little bit about you as well, so it should be good.
Honestly, no, it's my pleasure, mate. I absolutely appreciate it. I really do.
So where did you grow up? Are you like Burnley through and through?
I was originally born in Manchester. As I found out later in life, it was Stratford, where I thought was my original upbringing, but it turned out to be in the Cheetham Hill area. And when I found that out, I was like, yeah, that explains a few things. But I'd moved from Manchester when I was 2 years old, much too obviously young to remember it all. But I know I was 2. So I've lived in Burnley all my life, 47 years now. So I'm admitting my age, but love my town. I know it has a reputation, as a lot of northern towns do, but I love my town. Having spent a lot of time in the military and traveling, I've been very fortunate to travel all over the world. I do roll my eyes and shake my head when people say, oh, Burnley. No, I love it. So, yeah.
It's just like your home base. You're probably the same as me. It's like you can travel everywhere, but it's just nice to know you've got this place just to kind of, like this magnet that just brings you back to reality again just before you can set off again. That's how I've always looked at it.
Absolutely, mate. All my friends here, I'm very fortunate enough to be in the position. I know it's not not everybody gets that, but all my childhood friends from like 4 or 5 years old still, to this day, my best mate who was talking to this, we still see each other, obviously with the pandemic aside. So I've got a very close network of friends. My children have all grown up here, and while they don't live here technically, I know our Reese he's in the Marines now, and he's been in for 5 years, but he's looking at buying a house with his girlfriend soon. But my daughter's moved out of Burnley. Lily doesn't move in Burnley. She lives a village further over towards Darwin near Blackburn. But it's my town. I think even if something spectacular happened with the writing career, I'd still have a home base here. I just
part of you, brother. It's part of you.
You do.
So you say you've still got friends from when you were a kid and stuff like that. So how was the dynamic growing? It's very loyal, or I don't know. I've got my same school friends.
Yeah, definitely. It was an interesting time to grow up. I mean, I grew up in one of the toughest housing estates in the Northwest during the 70s and 80s, and being one of only like 3 black families in the area. So, it's one of those things where you either get on with folk or you have a tough time. And my dad worked in the local mining pit, which we had a mining pit in our area, in our town. He was very easy. He made friends very easily, and we became quite known in the community. And all of my friends are like-minded. It's very like-minded, and we just enough to say we're all batshit crazy, basically. So we just all gravitated toward each other, mainly because of obviously the catchment of the school. There's more schools these days than there kind of was then. But we all went to one infant school, one junior school, and then unfortunately we kind of split up when we went to high school. I was sent to Church of England School in Blackburn, St Wilfrid's. I understood it. My parents wanted the best, but I just wanted to go to school with my friends. But I'm a firm believer if the child wants to learn, they'll learn. If they don't, they can be disruptive, and unfortunately the latter was my path.
Right. So have you got brothers and sisters, or just you?
My father, God rest his soul, was a very busy character, shall we just say, as I became affluently aware as I got older. I do have a famous half brother, Mark Bright, who was a professional footballer.
Of course. Oh shit, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Putting it all to bed, we're aware of each other. We grew up wildly separate. He released a book himself last year, I believe. I very much understand his interpretation. He didn't have a relationship with my father, and he's got his outlook on it, which I completely respect. But yeah, it's become a bit of a running joke, is that every year there's another one seems to pop up, and it got to the point last year. Very lovely lady, older than myself. It was kind of like, I think your dad was my dad, and it's like, yeah, probably.
It's just like water off a duck's back. Yeah, maybe.
In many respects, though, it was a different time, and the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I don't agree. Look, relationships come and go, and I'm very fortunate. Yes, my 2 relationships with my children's mums didn't work out, but we're all very close still. I'm still very close friends with them. It is what it is. It's the way it is. But the relationship, or the lack of thereof, that I had with my father absolutely drove my need for a relationship with my children. They're my best friends, and I'm very thankful, touch wood, to say that they think of me as theirs. When they were growing up, obviously, I was their parent, I was their father. We had a very solidarity-based relationship with the mothers. There's none of this playing each off. But as they get older, when you're growing up, yes, you've got to be parent. When they get older, we can be best friends. So, because I think hopefully prepared them well enough for life, and they can go off and do what they need to do. So
what was you into when you was a kid? Was it always music, or did you have any other interests, sport or anything like that?
Yeah, very sporty, always through life. But my father was a musician by ear, and he had me playing. My first instrument was piano and organ. That was about 5.5 years old. And then I joined, I was in the Cubs, Scouts, Ventures. I went through the whole thing, but I was in the Scout and Guide band. I played trumpet and eventually drums. I played piano, organ, clarinet, violin,
Shocking hell, man.
Yeah, I taught myself guitar and sing, obviously, from the Depon Eye to Exit State days. So absolute part of my life. It had dominated my life to such a degree, Rob, that as obviously that's how you and I came to know each other, as we were just talking about from 1998 with Russ put the Bad Penny CD together, and but it had dominated my life to such a degree that when Exit State finished 5 years ago, I haven't done anything since, and I haven't really had any desire to be honest with you. It was well over 20 years of my life, and toward the end at a decentish level, obviously, the same as yourself, you played at very high levels, and whilst it's fun and it's a lot of work, it does take a part of you.
There's a lot of work outside the odd really cool looking Facebook photograph.
Isn't there, and it's great to have number ones on Kerrang and have all these super tours, and it does take a part of it. It really does. And I've been fortunate enough to have an outlet for my creativity in terms of writing novels, which is something that just came completely out of left field. It was just,
We'll get onto that in a minute.
Yeah, at least I get that connection with my artistic edge, be able to express myself. As being a musician yourself, it's not just about writing music, it's an expression of yourself, especially, if you're a lyric writer. It's very much, I'd defy any lyric writer not to be saying something about who they are, or whatever topics that's on their mind at the time. So it's great to have that outlet and be able to express myself and still have a connection to not only new fans, but people who we brought on board with Exit State, which is fabulous. All those people still message and talk and have those friends, So
what trouble did you get up to when you was a kid with all these mates who you still got?
Oh my God, how long have you got? Honestly, thankfully, as kids, we never brought police. Well, most of us never brought police to our parents' door. But yeah, put it this way. If I hadn't joined the military and my friends hadn't gotten good jobs, we'd have probably gone down as what is described in the press when something bad happens as lovable rogues, So, drinking, smoking, fighting. Yeah. We were at it from a relatively early. My kids will kill me if they listen to this. They'll be like, "You hypocrite," So, but again, it's more of a case of, well, I expressed to you not to do the things that I did because it's the path that could have led me to a life of doom. But yeah, we were tearaways, mate. We were talking about this before the pandemic of all the dumb shit that we used to get onto, riding BMX bikes off school roofs and jumping off billboards and running across canals of the ice that was just the thinnest of the thin. It's just amazing that we actually made it to this age, to be honest with you. It health and safety nightmare.
Could you imagine if you had your iPhones back then and the shit you'd have captured? Wow.
It's one of those things that you certainly don't need. Our age, our generation, and obviously you're of the same generation, we didn't need to document all that because that's what great storytelling makes for, that skill that perhaps is getting lost where people sit together in a pub and tell stories of I don't know. It's one of those things, but yeah, oh my God, if we'd have had documentary technology to the degree that it was easily accessible, it would have been, I wouldn't have been showing it my kids.
After you finished school, you went into the force. It was the Navy, right?
Yeah, I joined basic training before I'd even got my exam results. So,
was that something you planned on doing, or was it you finished school and was like, what the hell am I going to do with myself?
I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do with myself? And I actually decided one day that I didn't want to do double maths. So I said to the teacher, I'm going down for an interview at the careers office. And quite frankly, he was just glad to get rid of me from the classroom, for being honest, bless his heart. So as it happened in Blackburn at the time, the tri-service recruitment office has moved to Preston since then, many years ago. But to get to a bus to actually go home, which was truanting, for want of a better explanation, I had to actually pass the careers office on King Street in Blackburn. And I just thought, I should point, prior to that, it had been, the seed had been planted in my mind because I used to have to catch two buses to get to school. So one to get into Burnley Town Centre and then one from Burnley to Blackburn with all the other kids. And it was, I think it would be around about an October morning. The bus used to go right through the town centre at the time. And it used to be called Burnley Building Society. It actually had a number one song with You Can Dream a Little. It was the weirdest bit of trivia, but it became national and provincial. And they used to have dioramas in the window. And that particular morning, they had a diorama of a Type 21 frigate going into Hong Kong at night. And I remember thinking, wow, that looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Seeds planted. And I went in because at the time I'd just turned 16. So I got a card, which was to register, took it home, said to my dad, this is what I think I want to do. So he kind of went, yeah, let's not tell your mum. But I had to, obviously, somebody had to fill it in for me because I was under 18. So that was that. And then I got an interview and, took a medical. In fact, I would have, at the time when I joined, I was so underweight. I was just touching 8 stone when I went for my exam. The medical examiner had weighed me and said, I'd like you to put some weight on. And I was like, right. He wanted me to put a stone on in a month. And my dad was like, hey, that's just impossible. So he was like, he had me on all sorts, steak, full Englishes, Mackie stout, which was...
Was your dad pretty stoked about it? Was he like, yeah?
Yeah, because he'd served in the Gambian Merchant Navy, so he was well up for it, to be honest with you. When I came for my re-medical, I think I'd lost weight, to be honest with you. I don't think I'd put any on, but because I was a bit of a cheeky gobby person, when I went in, the doctor said, I can't remember if I weighed you with your clothes and without, and I went with immediately. So I stood on the scales and put nearly a stone on instantaneous. He was like, brilliant, stamped.
So can you talk about what you did and the places you went? Is it something you're happy to talk about?
Yeah, I can do. I joined, want of a better description, it was weapons and combat, gunnery, as it was at the time. Later down the career, because the Navy was struggling with recruitment while other forces were, and their idea was to combine two branches together of weapon engineering and weapon firing and management. I joined a branch called Operator Mechanics, which we were taught fix our weapon systems, and the guys who fixed them were taught to fire them as well. So, which was quite cool, which helped me massively for when I left the Navy. I went to work for Cable and Wireless as a digital satellite cable installer. But I was also very fortunate. My first ship was HMS Invincible, which came out of recommissioning. They got recommissioned with a new ski ramp for the Harriers and what have you, and she went global immediately. So my first ship just went everywhere.
Did you get to see Hong Kong like on that picture you'd seen?
Unfortunately, one of the places I'd never actually gone into was Hong Kong. I'd done the Far East quite a bit, Singapore and that lot, but just never Hong Kong. Weird, but Singapore was fantastic. But depending on your outlook on life, I was fortunate or unfortunate when the Gulf War kicked off, is that obviously our presence out in the Middle East elevated quite dramatically. And so there was quite a lot of trips out there. But on the flip side of it is that when you did a trip and you handed over to a new unit, you kind of went off and did what we call jollies. So a lot of that was the Far East, which I love the Far East. And then, the Bosnia conflict kicked off, which was not as good or glamorous. It was quite grim, to be fair. So a lot of places in Europe as well. But I was fortunate the units that I had just went to quite a lot of places. So I've done a lot of countries, a lot of cities, a lot of different places, yeah.
How do you think the whole experience changed you?
Immensely. To the point where I probably could go back to 15, 16-year-old me and knock 10 bells of crap out of him because it was just such an arse, to be honest with you. It teaches you a different outlook on life. You've got, obviously, I grew up in a very disciplined household, overly disciplined, if I'm being honest. So that wasn't a big stretch, as it was for a lot of people. But just the level of camaraderie, the fact that there's something, you're part of something much bigger than yourself, very high discipline in life. The thought process of problem, instant solution, application, resolution is just, and these aren't things that that necessarily people who've never served in the military don't have, but you tend to have a very high focus of those who've served in that kind of lifestyle, of just being able to think very quickly on the feet, resolve issues, taking on a lot of responsibility and initiative. It absolutely changes you. And for me personally, it's not everybody's cup of tea, especially in our line of work where musicians tend to be a lot more on the peaceful side of, the equation. Nobody joins the military to be warmongers, genuinely, mate. Nobody does that. A lot of people in the country, especially in our country, unfortunately go in because feel they've no other option, but it's a great opportunity for them to grow as a person, to learn new skills, because the military pays for everything, whether that be engineering, office work, whatever. No matter what, you get some skills in life. And as I did, and as a lot of my friends did, you get to resit your exams as well if you want to, and you get a lot of, because there are exceptional teachers who serve in the military, the officers, and effectively I resettled my O-levels and stuff like that through the military.
Superb.
Yeah, absolutely defined the human being that I am today, really.
How long did you serve?
12 years.
Wow. I didn't realise it was that long. Blimey. So what was your immediate plan when you left?
Well, I had gotten to the point where we were doing a lot of back-to-back deployments, and they were like 8 to 9 month deployments. I was missing the kids quite a bit, to be honest, because Reese and Tyler were about going 4 and 2 at the time, so I was missing the kids. In fact, our Reese would have been 5 when I left in 2000, so yeah, I was missing the kids a lot. Plus, with the early incarnation of Depon Eye, the band, I was getting really bitten by that.
So it's pretty much straight into the music then?
Yeah, obviously with having a family and responsibility, I had to get a job. So I was fortunate enough after doing one of my old, like I said, my old friend I was talking about earlier, he got me a job in an aerospace place doing some work. And then eventually a few months later after that, I went into work for Cable and Wireless, which was very fortunate, again, from another friend's recommendation. But we started doing the band thing, and like everybody does when you start, we're going to be massive, we're going to be famous, Sony will pick us up. And the reality is obviously quite different, but we had something And this super cringe when I look back at some of the Depon Eye stuff, but we had something in those 90s that people liked, and we did okay.
How easy was it to find like-minded musicians? Was it people you knew?
Yeah, that was that way around. So I'd got obviously a lot of people in the band, and I'm sure you were the same. A lot of them get into it 14, 15, 16 years old, and then start to find their way once they get to 17 and 18, because it is, in the grand scheme of things, a young man's game or a young person's game as you start out. So I was like well into my 20s when I decided, I was going to start joining a band. So my ex-wife, Reese and Tyler's mum's brother, Leighton, he'd said, "Oh, you want to be in a band, don't you?" My friend Justin, he's putting a band together. So that's how that had happened. And I was woeful at guitar. I remember when we met in this horrible rehearsal room on the first day, and I said to Leighton, "What is it they play?" "Oh, I don't know, all that 1960s and 70s rock crap. I don't know." So I'd learned, obviously Smoke on the Water and Born to Be Wild, all the things that you can think of that was probably on the best American rock album ever, And I'd gotten down to there, and I was so blagging my way through. At the time, I'd just joined to be a rhythm guitarist and just kind of sit there in the shadows and watch how this thing went. So after a while, that sort of militaristic side of me of having to step forward and take charge happened, and me and Justin shared such an akin for wanting to write music rather than just play covers. I've never been like Adam from Exit State. He's just like a human jukebox, and Phil as well. I've never been a covers guy. I couldn't. I've got a few covers that I could play, but it's always been original music that it's interested me in writing. Putting my stamp on stuff. So we'd kind of gotten to the point where I was coming home at weekends when I could get home, and we'd rehearse when we could. And then Justin and I had said, "Listen, we're going to book a gig. We just have to learn some songs, write some of our own." And then we went and did it. And I think like everybody's, the first gig was just awful. Between me and Rog, I don't know if you remember Roger Rawlinson, the keyboard player, who was actually in the band called Not Sensibles. He'd come to see us that night, and Not Sensibles were one of John Peel's favourite bands. They had a relatively decent hit with I'm in Love with Margaret Thatcher. And unfortunately, they ran out of money before they could capitalise on John Peel's promoting of them. But Roger had come to see us because he was like, he's heard about this new band that was formed. And we booked it at my local pub, a really small place. And like every band that starts out, we were super loud. So we get there that night, and our first song was All Along the Watchtower that we opened up with. And in that, I was going to take the first lead solo, this first solo part. And so we get to that point, and I step forward to take this first opening solo from after the intro first chorus, and my strap went, and I caught my guitar in horror. It is literally, people are stood on top of each other. It's that packed. And I'm like, and you feel that liquid magma go up your neck and everything. I'm like, and my mate's going, chin up, chin up. I'm like, I can't get my guitar up, never mind my chin up. And as I managed to get my strap back on, I went to go again and it fell off. The whole first set was just a disaster from start to finish. So we'd sort of had a break and I must have smashed 6 pints down. And we get into the second half and we opened up with Some Might Say by Oasis. And I don't know whether it's a case of just abjects, it was shit. That was the end of it. And we just come out and played a blinder. And of course, once everyone's tanked up, the only thing they remember is having a good time, not that the first half was poor. So we took stock after that and decided, I decided, listen, it's kind of like I am, this has to be better. We have to exude more confidence, and this has to be better. And when you're sort of doing post-mission analysis. So some of the memories, and I was very fortunate with Exit State to go on and play at a very decent level. Those early days, they're the best. They are the best. Everything's so new and exciting and terrible at the same time.
Was there many local bands around that time?
There was. Now, this is the tragedy of this day and age, is that in Burnley especially, we had amazing bands. There was Depon Eye, there was Uncowboy, there was Necessary Elvis. There were so many bands that were out, and we all shared an akin, and we'd all play at a place called the Carlton. In fact, you'd play at the Carlton, I'm sure. We came up and we'd play at the Carlton, and we'd all go off and do our bits and always come together and all play, do supports for each other, all of them. There was a real scene, and we still kind of friends to this day and talk via social media and stuff. And Burnley had a real vibrant scene for bands. I don't see it anymore. I don't really look for it, but for many years it just had this great band creation ethic that everyone helped each other out, and it was great. There was a lot of bands. It was fantastic at the time. Some of them, one of my favorites was Necessary Elvis. They were amazing. They were genuinely amazing, and with superb songs that I was a fan of, not just as a peer. It was amazing. It was just a great time. All great 90s bands.
So how did you go about recording early on in Depon Eye?
We did our best with Spirit small desks, and we can do this ourselves. None of us were Gomez. We didn't have that skill, but we actually went to a place called Studio in Rochdale because we all had decent jobs ish, especially Justin and I. We were self-funding, but Studio in Rochdale was actually a place that Elbow did a lot of their early recordings, and Pete Troughton, again, still a good friend of mine to this day. He's a great guy. Pete did a lot of our recordings, so he was a fantastic engineer, and we produced some decent sounding material. The quality of the actual songs themselves could be questionable, but the material itself was put them fantastic, and I think that helped a lot because in the 90s, I can imagine more so than the 80s, it's not like it is nowadays where people readily have access to be able to create great sounding music at the touch of their fingers in their own home. You did have to go to a studio. We recorded our first EP on tape, which was an amazing experience. It wasn't on digital desks or on Cubase or whatever. Now everyone can just create great music themselves. It just from your laptop. You had to go to a studio. So when somebody heard something that sounded like studio quality, they took you seriously. That helped us massively. While we were still finding our feet as songwriters, like I say, I listened to some of our old stuff and go,
So we touched on it earlier about the pair of us meeting through you appearing on the Bad Penny compilation CD. Compilation CDs, how about those things? You don't see them very often these days.
Thing of the past, mate, yeah.
I got to ask, how on earth did you hear about that CD, like bands wanted for it? Because I've got no idea.
Genuinely, I think it was through MySpace.
This is way before MySpace.
No, it can't have been because you actually got me on MySpace. I remember you saying to us, "Are you on MySpace?" And I went, "What's MySpace?" In fact, I remember that very well. And you said, "Oh, it's great, mate. It's where bands." So that's how we got on. So it can't have been. I don't recall. You know what? I remember sitting down with the lads and saying, I can't remember how we used to do this before the internet, because we all used to just print flyers off and go out and have a few pints and drive round and ask for gigs or write letters. Kind of, can we play at your place rather than sending emails? You forget how easy it is to try to secure a show at a venue via the internet. But I don't know how the hell it must have been via word of mouth, or I just can't remember because it was Derbyshire and we were Lancashire.
Exactly, yeah. Because I remember you as, for those who don't know, me and two friends has put together a compilation CD, and so we're trying to figure out the year, like 98, 99 or whenever it was, and put the word out for unsigned bands to be part of this CD, and I think we'd pretty much got the entire CD sorted. And I can remember Russ, who was doing it with me, called me one weekend and said, "Oh, I've had a CD from a band it must have said from Burnley. You've got to hear it. We've got to get these guys onto the album." And it was yours. We'd pretty much got the lineup sorted, and then Russ told me that he'd got this CD in the mail. "Oh, we've got to get this band on there." And I can remember hearing it, and going back to what you said, the sound quality was awesome and was like, yes, this is perfect for this CD.
Genuinely can't remember, but obviously it's 20 or 22 years ago, and because of that CD, obviously I've become excellent friends with yourself. I hadn't heard from the Burdock lads in ages, but through that as well with Russ and yourself, because I remember we were going to do a gig and you got us down because of the Twin Towers disaster, 9/11, you did a charity show for it, which introduced us to Eclipse at the time, and obviously still friends with Rob and all the guys to this day, and it's insane really to think. And it must have been Justin that got wind of it somehow, because I tend to have a really good memory of those things, and I can't remember how it came about, but I do remember that I tend to have the responsibility a lot for packaging a lot of the stuff and getting it out. I remember, it might have been Justin, because I do remember part of me saying, well, I do remember one thing, which I'll come on to in a second, but part of me thinking we had to do it really quickly. But one thing I do remember is that Russ rang me on a Saturday morning to let me know that he wanted us to be on, and I was as hungover as shit. I was so rough. The wife comes up, she goes, "I've got some guy called Russ on from Bad Pet or something." I don't know what he was saying, I was so ill, and he's going, "All right," because I like Russ. "All right, Duck, how are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, who is it?" "It's Russ from Bad Penny." Oh, hiya, mate. And obviously we went on to be good friends and stay at Russ's quite a lot when we come down and play with you guys. And We laugh about that because he said, you sounded so poorly. I haven't caught you that time, have I, love? No.
Because you guys have done all right with submitting tracks to various places, because you had the song Out Till 3 on the Bad Penny CD, and then you had the other Depon Eye track, Anger Management 101, which was submitted to a video game. Is that correct?
Yes. Anger Management 101 and TikTok went on to Flat Out, that was released on PS2, Xbox Original, Crystal, and PC. It sold well over 1 million copies. Unfortunately, it was one of those where it's difficult, isn't it? It was a sign your rights away kind of thing. There'd be no royalties from it, but it's almost one of those things where you weigh it up. We won't get any money from it, but the exposure was insane. In fact, if I can indulge you, I'll tell you a quick story about how amazing the exposure was from that. And to this day, I think Depon Eye is more kind of out there in those weird respects because of that game than Exit State was, as good as that we did. And it was after Depon Eye had finished and we were Exit State. Probably know I've always been into my gaming, and I used to be a guild leader on World of Warcraft, and we had 200 odd people, active people, and I was winding down my time on that, and I was playing one night just on a laptop, and I was doing some nonsense things somewhere in one of the regions, and this guy comes up to me and said, what are you doing? I said, in type, and I'm like, I'm leveling up my character, and he's like, oh, I didn't think about doing it that way, can I join you? And he said, yeah, of course. So we're just discussing, and he's saying what kind of, you get onto the usual things, what kind of music you're into, and I'm like, oh, rock, and he's like, oh, it's my favorite genre. And I said, oh, I used to be in a band, and I'm still in a band, but I was used to be in a band that had a couple of tracks on a computer game called Flat Out, and there was like this is a true story, mate, on my children's lives, a true story, and there was like this weird gap of no text, and he just went, I don't believe you. And I went, no, honestly, I wouldn't. We weren't like Foo Fighters or anything, so why would you make that up, And I'm like, no, honestly, we had a couple of tracks, Anger Management, and he just went, I don't believe you. And I went, okay. I was like, right, okay. So I had access to, what was it called? Thingy FM, Last FM. I said, right, give me 1 second. I will edit Last FM, Anger Management 1. And I edited it, Anger Management 101, for my mate, Master Killer, which was his login name. I said, right, go and have a look at Last FM now. And he comes back and he's like, oh my God, it turns out, right, that he ran a league for Flat Out players, because it was an online experience as well. His ringtone on his phone at the time, because he played it, was Anger Management 101. It was the most insane thing I have ever come across in my life. And it was one of those where I kind of immediately regretted my decision, because all his mates logged on and my chat just went mental with purple. Oh my God. I was like, and these people were like, it's my favorite track. And it was just one of those where you think, wow, so exposure in that respect sometimes can be, the money would be great, but it was just a shame that we didn't carry on with Depon Eye, because we probably missed out on a trick of actually capitalizing on that notoriety, But that was one of the strangest things that happened.
I can't remember. Did you used to play that song with Exit State, or did you just leave it behind?
So when Depon Eye finished, because we're doing a lot of gigs a year, and it started to get a bit serious once when Justin and the guys had sort of wrapped in, and it was me, Pete, and Alex. It was getting a bit serious, and Alex was a bit older than us. He was kind of like me starting Exit State, and it was getting a bit hard work for them to balance the time. It was just a lot of time. So when it kind of organically fell apart, I thought, I'm going to start Exit State, or I'm going to start another band, which I was going to carry on as Depon Eye, but it was a 3-piece with me, Lee, and Sarah. And I just wanted to do something that was just super chill and not too serious. So when we started, we only had a handful of songs, and I picked the best ones out of it. Anger Management was one of them, and Death of a Rock Star, which I've been working on, and things like that definitely made it into the full Exit State lineup, and a few other little bits and bats. But yeah, we carried across Out Till 3, which was probably one more notable one that people knew about. So yeah, in the early days when it was the 3-piece, they carried over, and then as Ads and Pete and Phil joined, those just got completely binned and sidelined in favour of the thing that was more representative of the four of us, really.
Depon Eye kind of became Exit State. How did you approach that band differently? Was it simply learning from your previous experiences, or did the whole internet and social media explosion allow you to grow even more?
A little bit of the latter, but absolutely from the former. All of the mistakes and successes that had been made with Depon Eye is that you just kind of go, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to just focus on this. And our thoughts on it are, I said to the lads, right, what we're going to do is we'll make ourselves as well known as possible, within the local area and within around about 10 to 15 miles in a radius outside of it will be available to play any gig for anybody and support anyone at 2 hours notice, within reason, obviously. We probably would do nothing more than 2 hours in any direction, anytime, and we'll just do as many shows as humanly possible. And the idea being is that, initially you'd be begging everybody for a show here or there. And once you just become your name, because this is what happened with Depon Eye, your name becomes solid, you start finding people coming to you. And I always remember somebody was telling, it might have been Russ, to be honest with you, was saying, if you concentrate on just doing your craft and becoming as good as you can, rather than running out there trying to find people come to you eventually once they start to get to know you. And it just worked exactly as planned. We used to have a thing, what we call the 6 and 12. We were very business oriented as well, because if you're going to do something that you feel is going to be your mode of earning money, you have to be as well as artistic and have that creativity. So we had the 6 and 12, where the 6 was what we had to have happen to us in 6 months, and the 12 was what was desirable. So as you get to the 6, you analyze whether that worked, and then your 12 that was previously should become your 6. And it just seemed to work every time. It keeps you focused and making strides rather than just treading the same boards and making the same mistakes, and keep moving on, playing at different venues, expanding your network out and meeting new people and better bands who can introduce you to better people and better sets of fans and their network of people who might jump on. And and eventually, as we did that, and that circle started to grow outwards, and everyone knew who Exit State were, and we were very fortunate to fill venues in our local environment. And then as you start to get to Manchester, which if you're lucky enough to live in the shadow of a big city, especially a musical city, it's daunting initially, because mate, all venues and promoters, you have to bring 50 people. It's just idiocy. No band is going to do that. Take a chance on a band and allow them to grow a following. But we were getting to the point where we could regularly take 50 people over to Manchester, and it was just growing from there, really. And then that's obviously how we came to know Rock Sector and get Mark and Lynn on board as management, and eventually label, because we parted ways with King Prawn label, and off it went until we were getting tours with Schenker and things like that. So
you're unstoppable for a while, man. You really was.
It's weird when we look back, yes, but when you're in the cyclone, you don't necessarily know. When you're in the eye of the storm, you don't know that you're in a storm. So for us, we were very ambitious. We were good work ethic, and we were always wanting more. We never felt that we were anywhere at the time, and the lads around, the lads I work with, were all humble. We just, because people were ringing Mark up and saying, we want what Exit State is going. And obviously, as we started getting on Kerrang and things like that, and we were like, well, we don't feel like we've got what we want. What do you want me to mean? There was always more. I mean, I remember when I remember just throwing a little bit of an internal paddy once and thinking, we're good enough to be on Kerrang. And so we got a video made and we submitted it, and then we found out that it had been accepted. And I remember staying up till it was a Saturday morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, and on it. Now, I'd seen the video on my television 100 times, but when you saw the overlay graphics, it was just a whole different thing. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, that was amazing. And then my brain just went, that's not good enough. I want to be on during the day. I don't want to be on at 3:30 in the morning, So fortunately for us, again, I threw another paddy and thought, right, I want to be on during the day. And it just worked. We had such a great fan base that they requested us, and we ended up being number one in the most requested chart, above Paramore and 30 Seconds to Mars and Blink-182. And it was a couple of weeks ago when you have that age-old father thing of your daughter saying, oh, you're not cool, Dad. I am cool. I was in a band and we did this. She's like, you're not cool. And I went, look at that, because she's into like Paramore and 30 Seconds to Mars. And I said, we're number one above them. And she went, is that real? I went, yeah. And she went, oh. I went, what's what you got? She went, you're still not cool. Those were amazing times. But again, you don't get time to quantify the success, because you're just still working all the time, I don't think we'd have ever thought we were successful, even if we were playing arenas, to be honest with you. We'd have always been like, Again, if you're one of those ambitious bands take forever to get to that level, of the top level. And as you start to understand how the game works and the bands that you admire, and you realize when they're going on tour with other bands and they're just the support band, the lower level, and you start realizing that there's a much bigger pond to go into, even if you're a small fish.
Definitely. So this left turn, which you did into writing, can you tell us how that all came about?
So when we did, which was probably our most known song for Exit State, was One of My Bad Days, which became shortened to Bad Days after we had to relicense it for ourselves because of another licensing deal that we'd done. We'd done a music video for it, and one of the guys that shot it, he was doing short films for horror films and what have you. And so by way of that, I said, I've been trying to do some acting and things like that. And one thing led to another. So I was doing a few bits for Michael in his roles. And then you just end up becoming a bit part of an acting community, especially around the Manchester area and stuff like that. And then a guy called Carl Whiteley had come to see us play at Grand Central one night. And he'd said, listen, I've got this idea for a sitcom that I'm doing. Are you interested in doing some music for it? And it was about an indie rock band. I said, look, we're rock. We wouldn't be able to write for that. But if you want anybody to do some, bit parts or extras, I'm available. I want to do some more acting. So Carl actually cast me as one of the lead characters in it. But unfortunately, it was an amazing Order 69. It was, honestly, I don't say that because I was in it. It was genuinely hilarious. Everybody I showed it to said that should be on telly. But unfortunately, Carl couldn't get it picked up. But it started me doing more and more stuff and thinking more about. I've been into movies on TV for as long as I can remember. I know you and I share a great affinity for old movies and things like that. But I started thinking about movies and things like that. And back in 2000, do you remember Dracula 2000, the Wes Craven film?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'd watched that, and I remember, spoiler alert, but at the end of the film, you find out that Dracula's actually Judas Iscariot, and that his punishment for betrayal of Christ has been that he was the creature, the vampire creature Dracula, to walk the earth evermore as punishment and feed, blah, blah, blah. And I remember thinking at the time, while the film was a bit schlock cheese, but that was an amazing concept, because I'd never seen that explored before. And I'd grown up in quite the religious family. I was attending church right up to like 16 years old. And so I'd never, ever heard, obviously been well aware of the whole story. I'd never seen that expressed. And I just remember thinking that was interesting. So that was sort of sidelined into my mind. And then I'd gotten into the band Within Temptation. I really love Within Temptation. I'm quite into the operatic, big symphonic rock style with great female vocals. And they've got a track called What Have You Done? Now, as you know, as lyric writers, we can write lyrics, but people can interpret them in different ways. It doesn't matter what we've written them about. I think the crux of the song is that it was a guy called Keith Caputo that done guest vocals, who's now Mina Caputo, who's now transgender. But the song was, one of them had cheated on the other and you weren't sure. So it was, what have you done? There's a curse between us. But as I'm listening to the lyrics, what have you done? There's a curse between us, between you and me. For some reason, boom, into my mind, the idea of Judas Iscariot popped in. And as I'm thinking about the lyrics, there's a curse between us. What have you done? And I start thinking, well, what if he was forced to walk the earth forevermore in punishment? Because it would be a punishment, obviously, everlasting life. And what if he had rules imposed on him? And what if he wasn't allowed to make use of anything that he would have? Obviously, 2,000 years of treasure would be worth quite a lot. He was truly a bum, just walking the earth, having to do tasks for God and things like that. And then I thought, what if he had a task that he had to do? And it was just boom, one thing after the other. What it was actually really, it was forming an idea in my mind for a film. So everything that I was seeing was very cinematic. I had the opening sequence, which is the first chapter of the book. I knew how it was going to end. And I kind of knew there was one sequence in the book which I refer to as the fall. If anybody reads it, they'll understand what it is. But I went to Carl and said, Carl, I've got this idea for a film, but I have no idea how to go about it. I mean, what would you have to do? Write a script? And I explained it to him. And he was like, mate, Christ, that sounds expensive. I wouldn't know where to start. If I'm being honest, I really wouldn't know where to start. And I'm like, oh, right. He said, but can you write? I said, I've no idea, mate. I've no idea. I've never given it a second thought. He said, well, a lot of people these days are getting stuff picked up from novels because it's an easy way for studios to not pay expensive writers, but see the stories there for them and then adapt them. I was like, right, I don't know. I'll give it some thought. So I gave it some thought and I spoke to Lily's uncle, my ex's brother, and Ben was like, you could write a book. You could. And I'm like, do you reckon? He's like, yeah. So I kind of came home one night doing what we all do, putting on some music and sat there just staring into nothingness. And I thought, screw it. So I just typed in, how do you write a book? Read a few pages and then I thought, no, what not to do when you write a book. And genuinely, mate, that was it. And then about a week later, I just thought, right, enough research, just start writing. And like every new author, because I've not done creative writing, because I've learned a lot over the years, especially from my editors, but I just went black, type. And it was just prolific. It was just coming out and out and out. There was no pagination. There was no semblance to it. There was no viewpoint shifts. There was no character. Well, there was character arcs, but it was just all in terms of how it would be finished up in how my novels are now. It was just glorious gobbledygook. But I was very fortunate. Mark Appleton, the owner of Rock Sector Records and our manager at the time, his very close childhood friend is a published author, and he'd released Stephen had released a series of books. I think think he was on about his third novel. So he was saying, Mark had said to him, look, I'll speak to Stephen and see if he can, Stephen Clegg, sorry, I should have said his full name, and I'll see if he can give you any advice. So I'd had quite a lot written, probably about 3-4 chapters worth, but a lot in my eyes. And I'd sent it to Stephen and said, what do you think? I'm not precious. Tell me, be brutally honest. And he was being brutally honest. And he just said, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. You've got a very good style of story writing, but you dramatically need to fix your writing. But I guess one of the skills developed from being in the military was that tell me, explain to me and show me, and I'll apply it. So, we used to have things, something called EDIT. It was explanation, demonstration, imitation, practice. How you just learn how to do things in lots of different military things and how to do them effectively. I just apply it in it all the time. And I'd come back to Steve and said, look, I'm not asking you to write, but just tell me I'm on the right track. And he was like, wow, you're quite a fast learner. I was like, right. So off I went. And then I'd learn a powerful lesson and I was quite a way through. So I'd have to go back and fix it all. But by hook or by crook, eventually, 137,000 words later, I had this novel, and that's how it started. And then the ideas were all there, and I've decided, right, I need to write a second and then a third, and now I'm just about to launch my fourth with a few screenplays under my belt, and I've got more ideas than I know what to do with. And me and Lex, I know a friend of ours, Lex Jones, I'm going to do something in terms of hoping to pitch stuff for Netflix. And
amazing!
It's been an insane 9 years, really.
What was the response to the book when it first came out? Was it fast? Or did it just take a while for things to word of mouth?
I was very fortunate to have a captive audience in terms of the Exit State fan base. A lot of authors, bless them, don't have that luxury that I had of, having a ready-made fan base to punt to. In truth, I was originally published by no relation to Carl Whiteley, who unfortunately passed away late last year, much too young. Great guy, Carl, and I miss Carl, but I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for Carl. If Carl hadn't said, I would never have thought of it, genuinely. But Whiteley published me, and in fairness to them, they were medical manuals experts. So Mark Whiteley is a doctor, and he created a publishing company to publish his own medical manuals. But then, bless them, they thought, well, we'll try and do other people's. But as they got my novel, they didn't put it through the edit process that most publishers would do. So when I'd released my novel, it wasn't edited great. I knew that, and I did try and fix that over the years. But when I released my second novel, I got an editor on, Ben Way, who was ex-chief editor for Guinness Book of Records and other things. He's a very experienced guy, and I learned a lot from Ben and have done. And he really transformed my writing and my works. And the book's been excellently received. I think I'm averaging 4.8 stars of 180 reviews on Amazon for the first book. But I kept on getting these reviews every now and then of 2 and 3 star reviews that said, great plot, but badly needs an editor. Good story, but the writing could be better. And they weren't wrong. So this year I just bit the bullet. And as a self-published author, it's very expensive editing, especially when the books are so big. So I just put into my pocket, or should I say Barclaycard's pocket, and got it re-edited by Ben. So it's at the same standard as the other books, and I'm much better for it. I'm much happier. But yeah, it's insane. I've had the number 1 slot, the best-selling slot a few times in my genres, and I've done about 14,000 copies now of all 3 books.
Superb, man. That's crazy.
But yeah, it's been going really well. And the thing is that it picks up because, like Stephen King said, the only way to sell novels is to write more novels. So the more you write, obviously someone likes a book and then goes and buys the other ones. So rather than it's just selling 1 copy of one book, you can get 3 or 4 copies of multiple. So
genius.
Yeah. So my hero, Stephen King.
On that note, then, favorite Stephen King movie adaptation?
Oh, it has to be Misery.
Yeah,
it has to be Misery. I think Stephen King's one of these enigmas that how can you be so amazingly prolific as a writer and yet a lot of your works are just badly represented. And I don't know whether it's a case that his stuff works much better in the imaginations from his imagination to his readers. I don't believe Stephen King would ever write a novel with a film in mind. He writes works with the reader's imagination in mind. So in many respects, some of it works so much better because of the inference of what you believe and understand from his writing rather than what looks good on the screen. I mean, when you see things like, The Langoliers, I remember being an amazing story from, I think it was Skeleton Crew, I think it was one of the short story compilations. But when you see it, on screen, it's like, the fuck is that? it's
Channel 4 afternoon movie kind of thing.
insane. It's not got bad actors in, but Misery. I mean, James Caan, Kathy Bates, but it was almost written perfectly for it. And I'm not including The Shining in that, because I know the Shining version that Stanley Kubrick brought out was not the interpretation of what Stephen King had. Although I have recently watched Doctor Sleep, and I thought that was quite good, to be honest with you. I'm just reading through the novel now. One thing I've learned from adapting my own works into screenplays is Stephen King's right, you have to kill your baby. And it's one of the things that you start to understand is when people say, oh, the novel's much better. Well, it is. Of course it is, because how on earth do you explain what's going through people's minds like you do in a novel, and then go to an actor, okay, so this is going through his mind, go show that without speaking? I have no idea. So you're allowed to see inside the character's mind. You get the explanations, especially if it's close third person with a narrator view who's telling you what's going on. It's very difficult for that to be interpreted on film. So of course that's why people always feel the novel's better, because you get an influx of greater information to establish your viewpoint in it. So, but Misery, and even when with the hobbling, because they changed the hobbling, because in the book she cuts his feet off with an axe,
right?
But in the film she hobbles him with a mallet, which because in the book she chops his feet off and then blowtorches them, cauterizes them shut. But that split-second frame of that foot going,
genius,
amazing.
That it was, man.
Genius, yeah.
So finally, to bring things to a close, what about stories from your days in the band? Any chance of bringing out some cool characters from your touring experiences in either like a Spinal Tap or Almost Famous kind of way? Or even a supernatural band? We
had something in Exit State called the Scruffy List. It was about 6 pages front and back, a big single-lined A4 of all of the dumb and stupid shit we'd either done or been involved in. And whilst I write horror, prolific horror, I don't think I'd subject that to the world, to be honest. So maybe, I'm honestly, I was explaining at work about an idea that I've got for another story, and my sales office manager turned and said, do you ever sleep? My brain's always going on about it. But my focus has been the Judas novels. God, I didn't say what they were about, but obviously I had the Judas novels about Judas Iscariot, who's walking the earth, punished, as I mentioned, by Christ. And in 2012, he's been given a mission by God as a skilled swordsman and unable to die, to protect 6-year-old Charlotte, who is referred to as the light, whose job it is to bring humankind out of its hedonistic ways and correct the course. And her identity's been compromised by Lucifer, and he sent all his forces after her because his plan is to absorb her spirit and kill her, and then remove hope from the world, take over the kingdom of man, and then move on the white kingdom of heaven. Obviously, as Judas he's a very, very gruff, uncompromising character who's been told to look after a child for 3 days as she reaches her 7th birthday, which is her moment of enlightenment. And it's his growth through that, coming back to humankind. I think one of my favorite lines in it is when he sort of reasons with himself of realizing that he's been too horrible, and that spark of humanity starts in himself, and he just says in his own mind, oh, welcome back to the human race, dickhead. So
yeah,
the novels then continue the story as Charlotte and Judas's relationship deepens.
Did you ever think there'd be a continuation? Did you have like the George Lucas Star Wars blueprint in your mind?
I didn't. I genuinely didn't. I only thought that I had this idea for the first book, and it was an end. So whilst the first book is a hard end to the story, as I got through the edits or getting to the point where it was released, I thought there's more that can be told here. There's more that can be done with Charlotte's character, and I'm a massive, massive fan of strong female characters in works. And my children are my inspiration, and the embodiment of those who they are is in that. But in particular, my daughters are Charlotte's a combination of my daughters, and how strong, intelligent, and amazing they are. So it was just a joy for me to be able to put that down on paper as a representation of what a strong female character would be. But the fourth book I'm releasing is towards the end of the first book. There's kind of an event that happens where it was almost on reader faith, where I would be, it's happened, let's just accept it, move on, because to explain it would just detract from the main story at the climactic cycle of it. I remember with my screenwriting partner Mike, I wanted to write a good old-fashioned horror script, like 1963, The Haunting, where it's not jump scares, it's all atmosphere and tension. I didn't mean to, but because it's a police horror drama, so to speak, I started using police character names from the Judas novel by mistake. But I said to Mike, I think we've got an opportunity here to tie it into the Judas universe, and explained, and he agreed. So that's what we did. It kind of explains why the event toward the latter end of the first book happens, with characters that run the same arc around the same area, but it can stand alone as a story.
It's a nice little throwback.
I kind of refer to it as a book zero in the storyline, because it's not exactly a prequel, but it just happens in the run up to and explains an event during the first book.
I love how passionate you are about it. It's so good. Dude, thank you ever so much for that. That was wicked. I loved it.
Rob, honestly, it's been amazing not only just to do this. I thank you very much for that and introducing me to your listeners. And, I know that straight to video stuff, I know that's been doing really well, which I've been finding amazing. But I just appreciate it. And not only that, I'm such a, to see your face again and catch up. And I think the last time was down in Nottingham, wasn't it?
It was.
When you came to see us.
Long time ago, man.
That guy threw the glass at Phil.
The PA speakers went on fire as well that night, right?
Yeah, because the guy threw his glass overhead into the air that landed on the speaker next to Phil, and it set the speaker on fire.
Just a regular gig. PA sets on fire. Nothing to see here. All right, mate, I'm going to let you go, but it's been lovely to see you, and good luck with the new book. I'm chuffed to bits that everything's going so good for you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
Big up to my Burnley brother Roy Bright for all his wonderful stories and a rate good catch-up. Remember to visit roytbright.com to find out all about his Judas series of books, and why not check out some Depon Eye and Exit State music too. Things are getting nice and busy in the world of straight-to-video, so I can't thank you all enough for your love and support. Please keep the likes, shares and follows coming, and if you get a chance, please hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at straight2vid, that's straight and number 2 VID, or you can find my own personal page at Laney74, where it's always great to hear from you, and any ideas and comments are massively appreciated. So till next time, take care and we'll speak real soon.